Hey, this is Erik Bohlin. I am a counselor, and we are going through steps 5, 6, 7 today. And it's something actually I do with step 4. It's only divided up because this is a video, but I do 4, 5, 6, and 7 in about a morning to afternoon. It really only takes about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, and it's so worth it. It's not worth splitting it up. I'll say a few words why this is so important. First of all, we know people really didn't split it up. They kept it very simple. If you were looking at what your defects were, why would you then have to decide, should I let go of them or not? And then maybe then pray about them later. People just did it right then and there. Step 5, we're going to learn in the book, it says that we looked for the right person to do this with. But it was not that separate, really. Because when Bill describes his experience with Ebby, he didn't really choose the best partner. It says we simply went through them together, as you'll read in page 13. I found that, I don't know, 80%, 80, 90% of the people have such a different experience, and they've been through the steps before. This is just very, very simple. And one can do more inventories later. I would call that steps 10 and 11. But anyway, we'll jump into this. So, looking at our book here, um, so we've just done our inventory with fear, and now one consider, oh, look, a sex inventory. I found that this is okay. One can do that. But why not just include this with any kind of conduct? So it says we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we justifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Really, believe it or not, I'm going to add something here. This is also step 8 and 9. It really is. There's no separate need to go through this. So when I go through my situation with Mark, which, we'll just do a few things to kind of emphasize in our inventory here. Getting it all set up here. So you recognize this. This is his resentments. And really, at this point, we don't need to look at all this. We just look at the defects of character, and we put them down here at the bottom here. We kind of put them here. So let's just say my wrongs. And you could also quickly just say, Dad, I lied to him. And then Mark might tell the story, Mom was disrespectful, not understanding. I exaggerated the hurts, held a grudge. Okay. With the people he had harmed at work, workers didn't work as hard as I could have. Took expenses that were not meant to be. You'll see how it just starts to come together. And this is where it might be embarrassing. There may be some sexual infidelity and stuff. This would be here. For those in the sex addiction, it's interesting. People say, well, I harmed myself and my wife and this family, But what about the porn people? What about the people in this industry? Casinos, like how do we harm? Well, there was not money for expenditures that could have been. So say like, we put money issues. I was controlling with money and then would spend it at the casino. Again, when I'm writing this, I'm writing it very quickly. Disrespectful. Yeah, what other control? I was controlling with the family, selfish. This will help you when we talk about steps 8, okay? So you get the idea. So you would just write a list. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, resentful, uncaring, um, in essence, in our own little world. So we got it all on paper. And here they're still talking about the sexual harms. If we generalize this, there's some value. Like if we're wondering about whether something I did was harmful, well, was it hurtful? Was it dishonest? Was it selfish? Was it fear-based, resentful? We ask God to mold our ideas and help us live up to them. And here where you're going to see step 8, 9, and 10 and 11 are all just embedded in here. It says, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we did not bring about still more harm in doing. Wow. So is this step 4? Where's 8 and 9? You can see it's all blended. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, are we doing step 4? Well, we're doing step 10 and 11 and 12. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. And then it's still talking about sexual situations. Talking with others might be helpful. And here, this is interesting. You can see it's kind of jumping into step 8 and 9 and 11 for guidance, but it says, we earnestly pray for the right ideal. Okay, how to repair family relationships, marriages, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. Here they're talking about sexual urges and things that could be harmful. And here this is written to alcoholics. But I find that just service, helping others helps a lot anyway. It says if we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. Okay. We have commenced, there's that commenced word, begin to see their terrible destructiveness. So this is where a comforting sponsor is helpful to say, look, this is going to be really good. You're going to repair this damage by God's grace. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. This is step 8. So you can see this is done in one afternoon. If you read this book again and again, that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. This is a comfort here. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. If you already made a decision, that's step 3. An inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks about the truth about yourself. It's a really important concept here. Notice how this is not dragged out in many months and even years. No, he says that you made your decision, you did your inventory of your grosser handicaps, and you have just made a beginning. That's how simple it is. Yeah, I get excited when talking about the simplicity. We're going to keep it simple too. This is what I do. Into Action, chapter 6. People can read this, but I personally don't say, go read this chapter and get back with me. People won't read it. They get slothful. Not to judge them, it's just how it is. And then they feel like, well, you can't get ahead. No, we just get together. Well, we don't really do step 5 separate from 4, and we don't do 6 and 7 separate from 4 and 5. And we get really good results with this. So I'm going to skim right through some of this, but the things I like to read, it says, now these are about to be cast out. Cast out? What about working on them? No, we simply ask God to cast these out, to remove these defects. This requires action on our part, which, when completed, will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us this 5th step. So that's the wording of step 5. Okay, but we've already done that. We've just done that together, actually, in this video, in the last 2 videos. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. So this is not something we do just by ourselves. Many of us thought it is necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason, first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking or drugging or lusting or fixing others or spending or gambling and overeating, etc. So we can't avoid this process. Also, what happens is, I think a defect, we make it worse than it is. Also, they have a colorful phrase, you can't save your face and your rear end at the same time. I softened it for our viewers, but yeah, you get to either save face or save your rear end. I'd rather save my rear end. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. Humility attracts God's grace, and that's what we're trying to I guess we could use the word achieve here. And then, having persevered with the rest of the problem, they wonder why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear, and they only thought they had humbled themselves, but they have not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their story. Okay. Alcoholics, addicts lead double lives. We look for the right person. It says psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair chance. Yeah, and it's because we haven't really told them the whole truth or followed their advice. And a good way to think about it is, I am a therapist, so I'm one of those. People are either ready or they're not ready, and that's okay. We don't try to force things. I think people will come to an honest appraisal of themselves when they have a safe place to do so. It says, we're unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men. We were honest with no one else. So honesty kills this disease. It's very powerful that way. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. This is my experience. If I'm honest, it works really well. So naturally, we pick someone who is confidential, and we pray about this. And it says, those of us belonging to a religious denomination which requires confession must, and of course, will want to go to that properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. Though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with someone ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. why would this be bad? Why would this be? And this is back in the 1940s, because I think spiritual people or religious people would see this from a spiritual point of view rather than a judgmental viewpoint. They would see that human willpower can't work. And so I think that's what that's saying there. We find someone who's closed mouth, understanding friend, perhaps our doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family, but we cannot discuss anything to our wives or parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. I do think it's very interesting to see that back then they talked about having even a spouse do this. Um, there was a section here I wanted to show. um, We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. The rule is that we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. That's a really good phrase there. And yeah, I tend to want to be hard on other people and less hard on myself. But that's kind of the way of 12 steps. Um, talks about postponing it, but I find that most times sloth and postponing and avoidance is probably our problem. Um, we then decide who is to hear our story. We waste no time. Or when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have written an inventory and prepared for a long talk. This could steer someone to believe that they should write it all out themselves. And I just don't find that they did that in the early days. It's not that they couldn't have, but I think that keeping it simple was good. We pocket our pride and go to it illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. That feeling that the drink or the spending or the gambling or the overeating or the overworking or fixing others or lust has disappeared, we will often come strongly. So it begins to go away. We feel that we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Now, this is nice writing. In fact, I used to really be attached to it and do it, but I found that if we just did steps 1, 2, and 3 like last night, today, if we did 4, 5, 6, and 7, then why would we have to question that person's urgency is still there? This could become too tedious and slow down. I find that if over 2 to 3 weeks people do the steps and step 10 and 11 every day, that's what's really building the structure, in my experience, that steps 1, 2, and 3 might be to say, I want to build a building. I want something different. I need to look at a relationship with God. I need to have a foundation. And so I need to clear away the wreckage of all the stuff that I've done and what are my defects. That's still kind of clearing away the ground. And then each day I am building one day at a time a relationship with my creator. And on that, the walls, the structure is built. So that's just my take on that. Also, to be clear, we didn't really have the book when this was done, so you couldn't take it down from the shelf. Um, so if we can ask to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all these things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us to be willing. This is one paragraph. It doesn't need to be occurring over months. And then it's really basically between 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's just in there. Who wants to keep all these defects of character? No one I know. I think that people get understandably nervous when thinking about doing an amends. That I see, and people are willing to have that. But if we're stubborn, God, please grant me flexibility. If I'm fear driven, please help me to have courage. If I'm selfish, please help me to be unselfish. If I'm too sensitive, and that's the root of a lot of my troubles, help me to be tougher. If I'm insensitive and uncaring and holding grudges, help me to be forgiving and flexible and more sensitive. So you can see where it's very simple. So it says, when ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We then have completed step 7. So we are now going to prepare for our prayer here. And we'll use the one that's kind of imaginary with Mark. It's kind of an imaginary situation there. And we often do this on our knees. Yeah, this is what I ask people, do you want to do this on their knees? And they go, sure. And so and actually for the effect of all this, I'm going to get on my knees now when doing this. Yeah, I'm on my knees there. And after a moment of silence, my Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. My criticalness, unforgiveness, my lacking of understanding, fear, self-reliance, laziness, avoidance, comparing myself to others. unrealistic expectations and my selfishness. Grant me strength, acceptance, understanding, insight, courage, trust in you, God. Trust in you, God, diligence and action to show up and stay present. Grant me humility, patience, hope, and help me to have a wise estimation of myself and to know that I am not you, God. I put my concerns about my son into your hands, and I trust that you will do what needs to be done according to your will. As I go out from here to do your bidding, amen. Well, let's talk about that. That was our prayer. We see that Mark, to remind you that Mark has a son with cancer. And so we embedded that in there with, I often do that. We pray concerns. We took his defects and put them in red, right there. And then we put some of the virtues or the remedies in there as well. That's very powerful, very powerful. We do this as a group, and that's powerful too. When we do it as a group, say like we have 10 people in pairs of 5 pairs and pairs of 2, and that's how a pair of 2 is. Redundant. That's when they've split up, they've gotten into their groups, they've done 4, 5, 6, and then they come back and we do 7 together as a group, and that's powerful. Sometimes we write out all our defects and people list them on a board, and then we're praying together. And I don't know, it's not emotional. It's not meant to be trying to create anything. It's just my experience that when we ask God to remove things, he does. And it's over time. And you'll see that this is really the beginning of doing this all the time in step 10 and 11. And you'll see that you can ask for anything according to his will. And we're so, or at least me, I was so predisposed to doing things my way and to try to fix myself rather than just let go and let God give me what I need. Like today, I was under the weather. In fact, I started off with a really good time. Then something happened, we'll say with pollen and mold and dust. And so something hit my nasal cavities passages. And then I started to get really mad at people around me, kind of blaming. So ding, 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 that's defective character. Please help me to be kind. Help me to think realistically, because we so don't think realistically, or at least I don't. And so that's how it works. It's a constant screening for these things. And I realized that to blame it all on one person or on one thing rather than look at the big picture, that maybe a couple of nights I haven't slept well, maybe I was doing some work around grass by mowing the lawn. That could have been an influence. So when we start to get wacky, we start to not, those are those defects. And then the defects are what we quickly and simply want to be able to list them off, to ask God what they are. So eventually you'll be able to do this in your head, in your heart. But every so often I sit down with someone or myself and go over my list. I take pictures of it. I have a journal, which I use. So anyway, I'm excited. We'll see you in step 8 and 9.